What is going on? It's Alex coming back at you with another video, and today we're going to be breaking down the best and worst performances from this most recent week of college football playoffs. If you are new, feel free to like, comment, subscribe. You guys know how to use YouTube. I make content like this almost every single day, so if you guys like this and draft content, feel free to stick around. Would love to be able to hear from you guys. There are a lot of guys who I like to be able to put on this list, but we actually were able to get actually a good amount of winners as well as a good amount of losers. Majority of these guys are going to be heavily focused towards the upcoming draft, but I still think that it's worth being able to bring up a lot of guys who might be in the up-and-coming realms of the next year's class as well. But let's get into this. Let's have a great time. Starting out with our All-Stars of the week, and it's back-to-back weeks with JT Tuimoloau. And JT had a wonderful week here. He had a 65 defensive grade, but he had 7 pressures and 2 defensive stops. This guy's just been absolutely killing it. He's done a fantastic job this year. Really showed out versus Oregon. That was like the biggest game in my opinion for him to show out on, because those were like the most translatable tackles, and he did so. So he's continuing to do it week after week, and then in the biggest moments here in the playoff, he has been able to do it. So I love that to death. Good job to JT Tuimoloau for being able to put on quite a stellar performance back-to-back versus Oregon. So love that for him. Then we got Jeremiah Smith. He should have been on here a billion times. I've tried my best not to mention the guys in the future classes, but I mean, shoot, this guy did such a good job this week. 7 catches on 10 targets, 187 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had a carry for 5 yards. I mean, this guy really is probably the best player in the entire country, and he's a true freshman. So I cannot imagine how he's going to be able to develop even more and more over the next couple of years. This guy's a lock, a number 1 overall pick. I don't care if Arch Manning comes out the same year that he does. I would take Jeremiah Smith unless I have like 3 number 1 receivers. Like Jeremiah Smith really is that kind of difference maker to where I think he outweighs pretty much anything related to positional value. He is truly a unicorn. So good job to Jeremiah Smith. Next, we got Colin Simmons, another player who is extremely young, but 71 defensive grade. He had 8 pressures most of the entire week, as well as 2 defensive stops, so good job for him. Excited to see him continue to grow, continue to develop, and then maybe see if he can add a couple more pounds as he matures into his NFL-ready body. Then we got Matt Golden. Matt Golden is someone who's been actually on quite a tear recently. I think versus Georgia, he also had a really solid week, but this past week, he ended up having 7 catches on 10 targets, same as Jeremiah Smith, but he had 149 yards and 1 touchdown. Matt Golden has gotten a lot of respect, a lot of love. He was my number 14 receiver coming into the year, and it's just so awesome to see him gain the respect and love that he deserves. Matt Golden's doing a fantastic job. He really is going to lock himself as a day 2 pick. I really hope that he does come out, because the momentum is solely in his favor right now. So good job to Matt Golden there, formerly Houston wide receiver. And then we got Will Howard back-to-back weeks as well. Talk about, like, he ended off the season so horribly, essentially, because, I mean, losing to Michigan when Michigan didn't really have a competitive core of players. Being able to do that is quite astonishing in the worst way possible. But Will Howard over the past couple weeks has really turned it on. And Will Howard this past week ended up having 26 throws. He completed 17 of them for 319 yards and 3 touchdowns with 0 interceptions. He had 2 big-time throws and 0 turnover-worthy plays on top of that. He had 4 carries, I believe, for 13 yards. So I think that's pretty damn awesome. Really good job to Will Howard nonetheless. This dude's done a fantastic job. He's solidified himself, in my opinion, as a later day 2 kind of guy, where just extremely high floor. He was QB4 for me before Allard decided to return. Technically speaking, he is my QB3. I really do like Will Howard. I hope to see him continue this type of run when the pressure is at its highest. That's so key to me, to be able to see quarterbacks when the pressure is on perform their best, and that's exactly what Will Howard has done. Now, let's talk about some stock up players, and there's a little bit of sneak peek here. There's more than one list, which is actually quite crazy, but let's start out with Kaytron Allen. 17 carries, 134 yards, but on top of that, he had 9 missed tackles forced. Love that for Kaytron Allen. Keith Abney is next, corner out of Arizona State. 75 defensive grade, a defensive stop, targeted 5 times, only allowing 1 catch for 5 yards. On top of that, 2 pass breakups. Trey Moore, next. He ended up having a 72 defensive grade with 5 pressures. 2 sacks are part of those 5 pressures, and then 5 defensive stops. So 5 pressures, 5 stops. Really damn good performance. Andrew Bakuba has been on a tear as well, stepping up in the biggest moments, locking himself in as a day 2 selection. But he had a 76 defensive grade, 4 defensive stops. On top of that, he was targeted twice, allowed 1 reception for 7 yards, and also had an interception. This guy has been extremely clutch. Vernon Broughton ended up having a great performance, yielding him actually a invite and accepted invite now to the Reese's Senior Bowl. 84 defensive grade, 6 pressures and 2 defensive stops from the defensive interior. Cam Scatterbo, he's just doing the Cam Scatterbo thing. 30 carries, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns, 10 missed tackles forced. He also had 1 throw, which was an underthrow. Good adjustment by the receiver for 42 yards and 1 touchdown. He also ended up having 7 catches on 10 targets for 37 yards. So in total, 37 touches, technically 38 if you want to call throwing the ball a touch, but 37 touches for 180 yards and 2 touchdowns. On top of that, a passing touchdown with 42 yards in the air. So great job for Cam. He ended up really bouncing back, a little bit of a slow start to the game, but at the end of the day, it's not how you start, it's how you finish, and Cam Scatterbo finishes strong every game. Tyleik Williams is next, defensive interior, Ohio State. Love him to death. 77 defensive grade, 87 run defense grade, 3 pressures and 4 defensive stops. Not necessarily a crazy performance, but a really damn good one. Denzel Burke, I had to include him on this because he got absolutely toasted by Evan Stewart the first time that it was around. I think he allowed over 170 yards. And this game, all he had was a defensive stop and 1 target, which was not allowed for a completion. And I think it's finally clicking to the Ohio State defensive coordinator that if your corners have a little bit of an athletic deficiency, do not put them in situations where they need to be athletic. Surprise, surprise. There's a lot of off coverage there for Denzel Burke where he was able to use his IQ to proactively prepare for anything that was coming his way. And I think that's why he had so much success. It's almost like if you put your players in a good position, they perform well. It's a crazy, crazy idea. Then we got Derek Harmon, another player having, a fantastic year declared for the draft. 86 defensive grade, 3 pressures and 3 stops. Highest grade there for Oregon. So even in the bad game for Oregon, he still ended up on top. Then you got Trayshawn Holden as well, another player from Oregon. 8 targets, 7 receptions for 116 yards and 2 touchdowns. In a group of wide receivers that are really solid, it's good to see Trayshawn Holden take a big step up. But of course, I told you guys that was not it. We have 25, stars of the week, including 5 superstars. And that was how many players did really well this week. Trey Henderson, another week where he's just been fantastic. 8 carries, 94 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 missed tackles forced, 3 receptions on 5 targets for 20 yards as well. So grand total 11 touches for 114 yards and 2 touchdowns. Great job. Donovan Jackson. He actually had a 0 pressure game this past week, 81 pass blocking grade as a left tackle. Great job for him. I still think he should be a guard in the NFL, but it's great to see that you could potentially develop him as a tackle, Eagles, that you can end up really having that ceiling there for him outside of interior offensive line. Leonard Moore's next, 78 defensive grade, 8 pressure, as I believe that was a sack as well. 3 defensive stops. Then he had 4 receptions on 6 targets for 20 yards. 2 of those were pass breakups, though. So the 2 that were not completed were pass breakups. So good job to Leonard Moore being able to be an asset as both a rusher, a run defender, as well as a corner in pass defense. So I love that for him. Damon Wilson Jr. is next. He's an edge linebacker hybrid there out of Georgia. 75 defensive grade, 5 pressures and 2 stops. You might say, hey, that's good enough to be on this list, but here's the big key. Those 5 pressures were on 10 pressure reps, so pass rushing reps. So that is incredible. 1 out of every 2 times he rushed the passer, he ended up getting a pressure. Great job for him. Jalen Walker had a similar stat line. He had a 65 defensive grade, and he had 5 pressures and 1 defensive stop. Jalen Walker did a fantastic job. Tyler Warren is next. 10 targets, 6 receptions, 63 yards, 2 touchdowns. Not the craziest game there for him, but just still a rock-solid tight end, man. He's going to be a good one. Then we have Nick Singleton next. Nick Singleton had 12 carries, 87 yards, and a touchdown with 1 missed tackle forced. Personally, I do prefer the Katron Allen performance just based on the quantity of missed tackles forced, but I still love how Nick Singleton was able to play. Emeka Egbuka was next. 5 targets, 5 receptions, 72 yards, and a touchdown. Adding on to, that throw by Will Howard was absolutely beautiful. That was the touchdown throw. But Emeka Egbuka consistently being available as a top-end receiving weapon. I am very excited to see him be one of those wide receiver 2 to 3s in the NFL who's just really damn reliable and really damn good. I think he should play every down. Then you got, I think he's called Iapani Laulau, or Lalulu. There we go. Those names are not easy for me to pronounce, as you can tell by my skin color. I am not a specialist at being able to pronounce awesome names. My name sounds as basic as possible, even though it's actually spelled pretty cool. But regardless, center for Oregon, 87 pass blocks, 0 pressures allowed. Pretty sure he's a true sophomore as well. If not, maybe a redshirt sophomore. But he has 2 years of experience there at Oregon. And, going up against Ohio State's defensive interior, he shut down Ty Hamilton. And I love that for him. Then you got junior. Here we go again. Oh, why did I save this for last? I should have done this at the beginning. Tui Halamaka. That is a sick name. I'm kind of jealous. But he had 71 defensive grade, 4 pressures, and 4 stops there for Notre Dame in their defeat of Georgia. So great job for all those guys. Let's talk about our stock down guys. Starting out with our duds of the week. Isaiah Bond, I mean, this guy needs to go back to school. I probably should have put NA as a projection. I just can't see him coming out. Maybe I could see him transferring, but 2 targets, 0 receptions. I know he's been banged up as well, and that's such a key thing for me. I just don't think that his performance has been at all indicative of how talented he is. At the start of the year, he was, a superstar, literally getting his freaking helmet ripped off as he was catching touchdowns. But, over the year, you really saw his health degrade, which is unfortunately what happens when you are 180 pounds. It's, there's unfortunately a large correlation to a lack of health. But Isaiah Bond, really hope to see him bounce back and, go back to school and have a really solid bounce back year. Then we got Johnny Cornelius, 6 pressures allowed and 56 pass blocking grade in a key game where he really needed to be better. Like last year, I'm pretty sure Connerly and Cornelius versus versus Washington performed better the second time around. This year, this time, Cornelius performed significantly worse. Technically, Connerly allowed 4 pressures as well, but on a consistency basis was better. But I did not like seeing them actually do worse the second time around. Then, this is not really like a super dud of the week. If you want to go off of pure production, I still actually really liked how Michael's been playing. And by the way, I've started to get back on the Michael train. He's performed so much better over this entire year. He's truly found himself. So I really do actually hope he comes out or goes back to school to become a top 5 selection. But regardless, he had a 61 defensive grade. He did not have a pressure or a defensive stop. He did have 1 target and 1 reception, which was for -8 yards, though, which I have actually already graded the game, which is why I'm more so talking a little bit deeper into Michael's performance. And I honestly thought he did not too horribly of a job. But again, you got to be able to stand up big and be able to perform in those big moments and be able to get a sack or 2 when your team needs it in the playoff. Don't like the fact that he didn't produce that way when other players on his team did, but I still thought that he had a solid performance. Again, it's just when you talk about somebody as people are talking about him as a lock top 15, you have a different standard. Then we talk about the guys, the rest of them who are stocked down. We got Jaden Blue here, who almost was a dud of the week. He had 4 carries for only 4 yards and a fumble. He had 2 targets and had 1 reception for 11 yards. But, Jaden Blue is someone who I think is amazing. His big issue, you look at the amount of fumbles per carry or carries per fumble, and it is not good. It's one of the worst that you've seen. And, the best ability is availability, but it also is security. The second one is probably security as a running back. Are you going to fumble the ball? It doesn't matter how big of a run that you have. If you fumble it at the end, nobody really gives a damn, right? It's almost like an arm punt. But regardless, Jaden Blue needs to work on those fumbling issues. Apparently, people are talking about how he has just said he wants to get to the NFL as soon as possible. I think he really needs to go back to school. Ashton Jeanty is people are going to see this and be like, oh my God, it's so hard to choose stock down guys. I'm just going to be 100. But Jeanty did not have a bad game. You hear the stat line, 30 carries, 99 yards, 2 fumbles. Not great. But the thing is, he had 16 missed tackles forced. He was doing as good of a job as you can ask for him to. He also had 3 targets, 3 receptions for 22 yards, grand total 33 touches for 100. And what is that, 21 yards, which is still solid. I still think that's solid, but it's the 2 fumbles that are the big issue. And I saw the fumbles, not not big issues, but I had like an 8 out of 10 in ball security. Technically speaking, he should be at like a 6 or a 5 based on the amount of fumbles per carry, because he has 8 over the past 2 years. Like, he had 3 fumbles this year, 5 the year before, but including the 2 today or this past week. But regardless, for Ashton Jeanty, the thing is, a lot of it is him like pushing through somebody and then fumbling. And I do think that you got to give some credit to the quality of fumble as well. So I knocked him down to a 7, which technically means Omarion Hampton is my RB1, but we'll talk about that another time. Regardless, he's done a fantastic job. I mean, this is not necessarily a legit stock down, but it does bring into concern something that was an issue last year, which is the fumbling issue. It doesn't matter how many tackles you break. If you fumble the ball and lose the fumble, it doesn't matter how much momentum you had, you just lost it all. So hopefully he continues to learn how to hold on to the ball, even in those tough second, third, and fourth tackle situations. That is kind of the curse of being able to break a lot of tackles, is you have a lot higher of a chance for being able to fumble the ball because there's more and more tackles. But next we got Michael Toff out of Texas. Correct me if I'm saying that wrong, but I think it is Toff. But regardless, he ended up having a 44 defensive grade, bottom of the team. Pressure, defensive stop, 5 targets, or 5 catches on 10 targets, 71 yards, and a pass breakup. Not a bad performance overall, in my opinion. I think a lot of these random grades were kind of weird. I even watched Nick Scorton's like 41 overall defensive grade game, and it was just like not remotely to the level of a 41 game. I don't know what PFF's been doing, but I don't trust the actual defensive grade stats, but it is what it is. It's a good reference point at the very minimum, but still, allowing 71 yards, not necessarily the best thing when it is actually a pretty loaded defensive back class. Then we have Davison Igbinosun. He didn't have a horrible game. 65 defensive grade, a defensive stop, 4 catches on 5 targets, 45 yards, and a touchdown and a pass breakup. The thing is, I lost a lot of confidence in Davison Igbinosun. I think that I need to rewatch his more recent tape, and I think that he showed a lot more scheme specificity, i.e. he cannot go to a lot of teams. Like, he needs to go to someone who could really hone in the right coverage system for him to be able to succeed. There was a lot of reps there where I saw that he looked really lost, and it does worry me. He's extremely physical, but I think that his physicality used to be something that he combines with his anticipation and just overall grit. I do feel like right now it is a little bit more compensation, and that does scare me a bit. So Davison might be slipping down the board a little bit. I'm going to be regrading him on that game as well to see where he ends up. Then we got Sonny Styles, linebacker at Ohio State, 55 defensive grade, a defensive stop, but he was absolutely eviscerated through the air. 8 catches on 9 targets for 98 yards. You got to be able to play all phases of the game. You got to be able to cover if you're a linebacker. Sonny did not. Mateo Uiagalelei is next. He's someone that people were mad was not in my 2026 way too early mock draft, which, yes, I have 2 of them up, so feel free to check those out. But this recent game, and one of the most crucial times for him to step up, he had a 56 defensive grade with 0 pressures and only 1 defensive stop on, I believe it was up to 40 reps. So, you got to be able to stand out. If you're going to be a first-round player, especially in a moment like that, I really hope for you to take that step up. Jordan James is next, someone who I really love at the running back position. 7 carries, 14 yards, so 2 yards per carry, 1 missed tackle forced, 2 receptions on 2 targets for 7 yards as well. Grand total 9 touches for 21 yards. Just not a big fan of that at all, because I think he's a lot better than that. And I think they ended up leaning away from the run game when they should have allowed him to build up some consistency. He's a damn good running back. He's a damn reliable running back, but it is what it is. Marcus Harper's next, guard out of Oregon. He's someone who I actually thought was like pretty mid at best, but still someone who had an okay, like someone maybe you could take him at the end of the draft and develop him, but maybe that's still the case. But he allowed 6 pressures this past week versus Ohio State for a 29 pass blocking grade. Again, do you trust PFF to be exactly right with their pass blocking grades? No, but at the same time, it is also a good reference point. When you allow 6 pressures, that is something that is a big no-no. Then we got Xavier Truss and Tate Ratledge, the Georgia, I believe, right side of the offensive line. Xavier Truss ended up having 46 pass blocking grade and 2 pressures, and Tate Ratledge 44 with 3. Both of those guys are still guys I have a lot of faith in. Tate is coming back, like he doesn't seem like he's 100% healthy. He was injured midseason, ended up coming back, and just has kind of struggled since. So maybe it would be good for him to return to school if he has any more eligibility. But Xavier Truss, he doesn't belong as a tackle, so I think he's going to be able to clean a lot of that up as a guard. But that's going to be the video. Thank you so much for watching. I love you. See you on the far side. Peace.